All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Data Room. I'm the host, Jacob Stravi, and today I'm joined by two awesome guests, Mr. Lucas Romanowski and Austin Cox. So these special guests today are actually some of my roommates. They're from Baker College, just like me, and we're just gonna get straight into it. So why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourself to the viewers? Tell them a little bit about your background, kind of where you come from, what you're studying at Rice, and what you're hoping to do in the future.
Lucas, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. Thanks, Austin. So what's up, everybody? I'm Lucas Romanowski. I'm a second semester sophomore at Rice, and I'm from Buffalo, New York. Um, and this is actually my first semester here at Rice. I transferred to Rice from the university at Buffalo, where I spent my first 3 semesters at college. Um, and I'm really interested in high finance and investment banking, and that's what I'll be doing next summer here in Houston at Citibank, working in their energy investment banking group. And that's what I'm hoping to do post graduation. And I've been really interested in finance since late middle school when I started investing in commodities and cryptocurrencies, specifically precious metals. But that's just something that I was doing on the side for a while because at that point I was really interested in civil engineering. And that interest in infrastructure came from late elementary school and early middle school. I started watching this documentary series from the History Channel called The Men Who Built America, and it went through Cornelius Vanderbilt, John Rockefeller's, and Andrew Carnegie's kind of backstory and how they built the companies that they built, which I was super fascinated by. And at that point, I really thought I wanted to do infrastructure. But fast forward to early high school, I took some coursework on it, found out it wasn't for me, and my interest in finance and investing had just continued to grow. So it was at that point that I decided to pivot to finance. My junior year of high school, I read Stephen Schwartzman's memoir, and I was really interested in how, right out of school, he started out in investment banking and it gave him a really strong skill set in finance that ultimately was highly transferable to him in founding Blackstone, which is obviously the private equity juggernaut it is today. But just coming out of high school, going into college, it really seemed like for me the best place to start in finance. So at that point, this was my junior year of high school. I was really deep in my college search, and I just thought that I wanted to go to my local state school because I believed that through hard work, I would be able to break into the industry. So I knew that I would have to get involved right away at my school. So I started joining clubs. I joined their equity research group and a long short equity challenge that they do every year. And I gained really basic portfolio allocation skills and valuation methodologies, which I was able to parlay my following semester into joining their undergraduate investment fund and landing a real estate private equity internship on the acquisitions team of a middle market fund in Buffalo. I really built my understanding of financial markets and financial modeling, um, and that those were just really good skills for me to acquire in my journey to recruiting for investment banking. And in that undergraduate investment fund, I was covering the energy sector, and that was right when Russia invaded Ukraine and commodity markets started going crazy. So it was just a really fascinating time to be covering the energy space, and ultimately, I just became increasingly interested in energy tying back to my interest in investing in commodities throughout high school. And I ultimately pitched a midstream player, Enterprise Products Partners, to the investment fund. And it was a great experience. And it was at that point that I knew that I wanted to do energy investment banking in Houston. So in July of last year, I really realized that I was committed to that path and decided to transfer to Rice to give myself the best shot of breaking into the industry. And that kind of takes me to the present today.
Awesome. Wow, Lucas, thank you so much for that awesome introduction. It's really cool that you were able to kind of find things that you're interested from a young age, and then as you learn more about what career options are out there, kind of find a way to incorporate those interests into your future career path. That's awesome. And we're definitely going to continue to talk about investment banking later in this podcast. But now let's hear a little bit more from Austin. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Austin Cox. I'm a junior here at Rice University. I was born and raised in New York City. And I kind of started my interest in finance around early high school when I took a class, just basics of global markets and economics, teaching us how different financial instruments work and how they could be used to build a portfolio. The professor at my high school who taught that class actually moved on. So I took it upon myself to apply to administration and teach a class my senior year, which I called Finance and Asset Management, which is more focused on thesis-based investing, trying to get kids to have a reason why they want to buy a stock. I always use the example, like not say Apple because they like the new iPhone, but because they see some sort of intrinsic value in Apple that they think the market hasn't taken into account yet. Following that, I worked a job. I guess I applied to Rice, and I got in as a finance major, and I've been loving it ever since. Rice's finance program is incredibly strong and um, just incredibly aligned with what I want to be doing in life. So I'm really happy doing that coursework. And as far as my work experience, my first summer after freshman year, I worked at a family office doing accounting for them. Basically, we were trying to consolidate these real estate assets, which were under different LLCs. They all had intermixed debt between one another, so we had to sort out like who owed who money, and how to kind of cancel out as much of that on the balance sheets as possible, which was incredibly interesting and really deep in my understanding of accounting. Following that, this past summer, I worked back at that same investment research or same family office doing investment research. We're looking at mostly public companies for potential capital deployment. I was looking specifically at the EV and EV battery manufacturing space. So a lot of tech companies in California and a lot in Europe as well, which definitely was a very interesting work experience for me. And I did a lot of financial modeling through that. So that deepened my understanding of kind of that interest. While I was doing that, I was going through investment banking recruiting. I ended up not getting an offer in New York City. So I pivoted into asset management and wealth management. I am happy to say I got a job at Fidelity for this upcoming summer, which I'm really excited about in Boston.
Awesome, Austin. Obviously, you're very interested in finance as well. That's kind of how we like to spend some of our free time is just talking about stocks and what's going on in the markets. And that is why today we're going to be talking a little bit about that later on in the episode as well. But first, I wanted to keep it consistent with all the other podcast episodes. So the very first question is, why did you agree to come on this podcast?
Thanks for the question, Jacob. Honestly, just learning about Jacob's experience launching this podcast and looking at some of the other guests that he's had on, it's just been a great kind of experience to watch Jacob do this because it's something that he's wanted to do for a while. And honestly, just getting to talk with some of my friends, some of my best friends at the university about, like Jacob mentioned, we'll be talking about markets a little bit later, but just also kind of learning a little bit more about each other's habits and what we do on the day to day to stay up to date and just kind of stay sharp. So it sounded like it'd be a really good opportunity.
Awesome. And Austin?
Yeah, I'm going to echo Lucas a little bit. I'm just going to say that I think Jacob was incredibly excited about this opportunity to host the podcast. Not just necessarily us, but the numerous impressive guests that he's had over the past few episodes, and he will have in the future. So I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to learn from him and hopefully get a good conversation in. So
Awesome. No, I appreciate the enthusiasm quite a bit. And obviously, as the viewers can tell, like I have a great network around me on the day to day, so that makes life a lot easier. Um, Lucas, you brought up something, habits. So let's just jump straight into the habits because one of the things I'm most curious about is habits. Like habits are something that we do every single day, and a lot of people don't necessarily think deeply about what they're doing every single day. But if you really think critically about your habits and try to optimize them, they'll have such a tremendous compounding effect over the years. And that's just what I truly believe. And so we're now just gonna talk about some habits. So I'm gonna throw out a habit I do, and I want to hear you guys' thoughts on it, and then we can just go from there. So the habit I want to share with you guys that I think has been really beneficial that I started doing my sophomore year of college is reading financial news. So I have a financial newsletter that comes to my inbox at 5 a.m. So right after the gym, either before I shower or right after I shower, I try to read that one. It gives me kind of an overview of what's going on in finance in like the last 2 to 3 days. And then I'll get another 1 to 3 financial newsletters delivered in my inbox throughout the day. Just some of them are a little more sporadic and some of them are very consistent. But I found that reading financial news really helps keep me up to date with what's going on. And it also kind of really keeps up my passion for running my own investment portfolio. Like when I'm constantly seeing these different market events, it's giving me ideas of how maybe some little trades I want to make. So with that, what are y'all's thoughts on like reading financial news?
yeah, I mean, so I would say personally, I've definitely tried the newsletter approach. I would recommend to the viewers Napkin Finance. It's a pretty like they've dumbed down finance into something that like someone who hasn't taken any finance classes could understand. I was subscribed to that for probably all 4 years of high school. But then I kind of got to a point where I just wasn't reading it as much, and it's hard sometimes with your inbox to just like keep up with everything that's in there. And when that's the main source of news, at least personally, I find trouble keeping up with that. So what I've done in college is I have just like a folder of all the news sources I care about, and in order of importance, in my opinion, is Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, New York Times, Bloomberg, and then Yahoo Finance. And I try to keep up with all five of those news sites, and usually they talk about the same story, so I don't always read kind of two perspectives on one thing, I usually kind of just skip and try to get to as much new information as possible. So I try to keep like either on my phone, something going on, or usually like on my laptop, I'll have like a couple tabs open at all times, like financial news, and just kind of refresh to try to see what's new.
Awesome. And Austin, just to follow up with that a little bit,
Mhm.
what time do you read the news at the same time every day, or is it kind of just fluctuate with the
It's
day to
entirely
day?
sporadic. It's probably not super smart to do it at different times of the day because you'll miss certain stories, especially in the morning is the best time, in my opinion, to read the news. But sometimes my schedule will be different that morning. I'll be traveling, there'll be some issue, and I'll have to read it at some other time of the day. But I always try to do it in the morning if I can. Usually before lunch is what I shoot for.
Awesome. And before we go to Lucas, just one more follow up. Like, since you have started reading these financial newsletters or just kind of keeping up with the news more actively, like, what benefits has that brought you?
I would say it allows me to contextualize a lot of market movements. For example, like today, Alibaba was up 15%. I was just looking at my portfolio, and had I not read the news that this morning, I would not have known why. But obviously, it's because they're completely restructuring their entire business, and obviously, the market really liked that. So I would say I really like looking at the stock market and the news side by side, and trying to identify in my own head how those are affecting one another. And sometimes I don't have an answer. Like for example, with Alibaba, I could have seen the stock price been down 20, 10, 15%, and it just as, saw that as just as obvious, like, oh, the market's reacting poorly to this restructuring. So I think it's interesting to see kind of both how the news comes out and how the public views it, or I guess the financial markets view the news.
That's awesome. And now we'll pass it off to Lucas. What are your thoughts on keeping up with financial newsletters?
Yeah, it's a habit I got into early in college back when I was at University at Buffalo and getting involved in their undergraduate investment fund. Kind of, I'll echo what Austin said about kind of being able to contextualize the moves you're seeing in your portfolio. I think it's really easy, especially I do agree that it's best to read them in the morning. I think that it's just it's best to be consistent because otherwise, like Austin said, your inbox gets crowded. You can fall out of the habit, and once you break a habit, it's pretty hard to get back into it. I think we'd agree. But yeah, it just helps contextualize the moves you're seeing. I know you asked Austin, do you read it at the same time every day? And he said it's sporadic. I try and be consistent. I know a lot of times I'll go through the Wall Street Journal just in between sets at the gym in the morning, and then once I get back from the gym and after I have breakfast or while I'm eating breakfast, I'll go through my inbox and read two of the financial newsletters I get through the Wall Street Journal. And then I think it's also good to have one in the afternoon as well. I know you recommended money stuff. I did sign up for that one. That's a great one. It's a little bit on the longer side,
Yeah.
so but for the viewers, that's one that I'd recommend adding to your list.
That's awesome. Yeah, so obviously all three of us are very active financial news readers. And just to kind of speak for all three of us, I would definitely recommend it to the viewers out there. I think another benefit that neither of y'all mentioned is for me in high school, I was a really big reader. And then once I got into college, like I didn't really have as much time for just like for fun reading. But I think forcing yourself to actually sit down and read rather as opposed to like watching videos or listening to a podcast, it can be really beneficial to just enhance your quick reading skills. And I feel like when I first started reading financial newsletters, my reading was a little bit slower than it was when I was actively reading all the time. But I feel like now, after having done this for about a year, I think my reading skills have definitely improved, and as well as my ability just to scan for information. Because as much as I want to try to read every word, like I know that's not maximally efficient. Like I really definitely I'm so oftentimes drawn to the headers, or one of my financial newsletters is all about showing the data through charts, so it makes it super quick and easy to consume that information. Now let's go back to something Lucas you brought up, and that's the gym. I love the gym. I think it's a great topic to talk about. It's a great habit to get into. Why don't you share your experience just kind of with the gym? Why did you get into the gym, and like what benefits is it bringing you on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, for sure. So for me, the primary benefit of the gym is more so I mean, I do think it's really important to stay in physical shape, and I think it becomes increasingly more important as you get older. But for me right now at this age, like part of the reason that I started taking the gym more seriously and going more than just like two or three times a week was because I think it's super important to stay balanced in your kind of your personal life and then with what's going on in school. And I think going to the gym a couple times a week for a couple hours just is really important for your mental health with all the classes and recruiting going on at the same time. So for me, it's more for just finding that life balance and being able to do something outside of schoolwork for a couple hours a week.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Lucas. So my freshman year, I had never been inside a gym before. I mean, I definitely been inside a gym, but I never like learned how to lift weights. I never lifted a bar over a bench, anything like that. But My three roommates really got me into it. They were all super into it before college. And since freshman year, I've been pretty consistently working out with obviously some various, probably no more than a month long break in there. And I try to go. At first, it was about 6 days a week. Then, as recruiting kind of ramped up, I made it like four or five. Now I'm sad to say it's at like three or four, just with my schedule getting super busy. But I definitely think it's important to go to the gym at least three times a week. Like Lucas said, it's a really good space to just kind of have your brain to yourself. You're not worrying about assignments or recruiting or anything. You just kind of have a little bit of time to yourself where you can just listen to music, enjoy the time in the gym. One other thing I would mention, being at Rice for 3 years, I feel like I've met a lot of people through the gym, and I'll just kind of see people around campus or in my classes or at social events that I'll reach out to, and I'll say like, hey man, I see you at the gym, like I see you're lifting heavy, whatever, and it's a good way to connect with people, and try to get to know them better. So social
Yeah,
aspect.
I definitely agree with that social aspect. Like, I generally try to go to the gym at the same time every day, and I can pretty much see the same crowd. And just over time, sometimes someone needs a spot, or like you ask someone, are they using something? And like you said, like over time, you kind of develop certain friendships at your kind of gym slot time. But there's two other benefits that I want to talk a little bit more about. And the first benefit I would say for me is like the confidence that comes with going to the gym. I like I wouldn't say like I had like body image issues or anything, but I went through a period of like bulking and then cutting. And like in that time when I was bulking, I pretty much just felt like even if I was eating like so much, like it felt like it was for a reason. And like same thing with the cutting, like even some days if I feel like more hungry, it's like it's for a reason and it kind of gives you that sense of purpose, like actively like always trying to like better yourself and kind of an aspect of life that we often take for granted is food, especially being as privileged as we are at Rice, like the food's available three hot meals a day. Like I think a lot of times it's easy to forget like where the food comes from and how lucky we are to have it. And so I think by bulking and cutting, it makes you very intentional with your food intake. And I think that's been really great. And then just going through that process of like getting bigger and then getting cut, like it definitely improves the confidence overall. It just shows like you put your mind to something and you're able to improve yourself over a longer time horizon. And then the other benefit that I want to talk about, which is actually the main reason I got into the gym in the first place, is I think it builds discipline, like forcing yourself to wake up every morning and go to the gym no matter what. Like occasionally there's exceptions, like occasionally I don't make it, but for the most part, I really try to go at all costs, and that way I'm just building that discipline day by day. So, do you guys have anything to share, not necessarily about the gym, but like the role of discipline in creating healthy habits and a good schedule?
Yeah, absolutely. So this kind of ties back into that idea of discipline that you just mentioned, and then also what Austin said about having like a maybe a maximum of a 1 month gap in the gym. So these past couple weeks for our spring break, which was 2 weeks ago now, the 2 weeks before that spring break, I didn't go to the gym for 2 weeks because I was in the heat of IB recruiting. And honestly, it was probably the hardest 2 weeks of my life. And not having the gym to have something else to focus on because it was studying until 1:30 in the morning and then getting up at 7 and studying again and preparing for interviews.
Dude, you
Uh,
made it though.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it was really tough. And not having the gym to have that kind of outsource something else to apply my energy to was really, really difficult. And it was also, I felt like I was, even though I was being disciplined and getting up and working on something else very productive that was ultimately successful, it still felt like I was kind of falling out of good habits and it just didn't feel good personally. So now on the back end of spring break, getting back into the gym, I can just feel how much of a difference it's made to kind of get back into that disciplined routine of going to the gym. So it definitely makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, just I would echo what Lucas said. Like the times that I'm consistently not going to the gym, I look back on and I I definitely am in a much worse mental state. Usually there's a reason why I'm not going to the gym, and for Lucas it was recruiting. Again, for me it was recruiting as well. But there's definitely been like other big life events that have caused that. So I think it's a kind of the combination of not having the gym when you need it, which makes some things even harder.
Awesome. So now let's keep the discussion revolving around habits. Are there any other habits beyond, working out, reading financial news? Are there any other habits that you guys have that maybe you've adopted recently, maybe you've been doing it a long time? Like what's something you want to bring up?
Yeah, I can talk about something. So I would say. for the first year, probably year and a half of college, I did not do too good of a job of keeping in touch with my parents. And that wasn't something that I ever thought would be like a big deal. I never was homesick. I didn't like miss home that much. I still got to see my parents for holidays and summer and such. So never really thought that it like was that would be that impactful in my life to like talk to my parents on a regular basis. And then recruiting started happening, and I started like having information to report back to my dad and my mom, who were giving me advice about all this recruiting stuff. And kind of getting in a regular habit of talking to my parents has been incredibly therapeutic for me. And I realized the value that it had kind of too late in college. So I would say one of my big habits that I definitely will not lose sight of soon is talking to my parents like at least once a week to each of their divorce. So I have to call them separately, but talk to each one of them once a week. To try to just catch up, hear what's going on with them, and it's definitely a good break and a good kind of like therapeutic moment to step back from what is going on in my life and kind of hear about them.
Yeah, Lucas, do you have anything to share kind of related to that or in that realm?
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo that. That wasn't even on my mind, and I'll kind of get to what I had in mind later. But just on to that point, staying in touch with my parents was imperative for me when I came to Rice. I came to Rice with the intention of, getting a job in Houston and staying in Houston after I graduate and not going back to Buffalo. So this was a permanent move for me, and it's going to be a permanent move because I'll be with City next summer in Houston, and then hopefully after I graduate, I'll get the return and be here. But I'm a family guy. Family's super important to me. So I also every weekend make sure that I call my parents, and it's probably I wasn't even thinking about it, but it's one of my most important habits, I would say, to stay grounded. Because even though I'm not seeing my family as much anymore, it's still important to have that contact. Kind of segueing from that into my next one, I think for me, the most important habit is kind of breaking down my schedule each day into chunks of time and allocating time accordingly based on the priority of each thing you have to get done. Because when you put that pen to paper and make a schedule and you force yourself to stick with it, you're going to be way more efficient than if you just go in and try doing work without a plan because you'll do a little bit of work and then you'll justify taking time to go do something else. But if you really need to be efficient and you're kind of between a rock and a hard place and need to get things done on time, I think that's the best way to do it. Just blocking out time, even in like 5 to 10 minute intervals, I've done some time, making sure that I'm taking every single moment to do something productive on those busy days.
Absolutely. I love that, Lucas. I'm really glad you brought that up. It's a very similar experience to what I kind of kind of experienced. I at a time there was a time when I pretty much just tracked my schedule through like the sticky note application. I would just have it up on my computer and I would just have kind of a to-do list. But it wasn't until I started putting like my action items that I need to do into my calendar. So basically filling out the entire day every day, that really started helping me stay laser focused and like lock in, get a bunch of stuff done. Like you said, when you're kind of putting pen to paper, putting it onto a schedule, it holds yourself accountable. And there's pretty much no way out. If it says I'm doing math homework at this time, like you need to do math homework at that time, regardless of if you feel like it, if you're tired. Like I definitely think that's a really great thing. And I know Austin, yeah, I know you're a big Google Calendar guy as well. Do you want to add
Yeah, I
anything?
was just gonna add one thing. So in high school, I was a big procrastinator. I would definitely leave things to the last minute, and I really always thought that planning would take more time than it would save. So I never really like put stuff in my calendar. I was like, well, if I have 2 hours of work, I might as well spend those 2 hours doing the work rather than spending 10 minutes like telling myself when I'm going to do the work. But I did not realize how wrong I was until I started using Google Calendar. Yeah, you're going to waste a little bit. I mean, spend a little bit of time putting some stuff in your calendar and organizing stuff out, thinking about when you can do things. But I promise, once you have that in your calendar and you allot a certain amount of time for it, you will get it done in that amount of time. Like it is such a game changer to plot out your time like that. And it for expert procrastinators, as I was, it may feel really difficult to start that habit, but once you do, it pays off immensely.
Yeah, Austin, would you have any advice for someone like that is a procrastinator now and might be interested in trying to find new habits but isn't sure how to go about it?
I mean, it's hard to break the cycle. It's really hard. I would always do my high school assignments on the last, the night before they were due, and it always worked out for me because I could get away with it then, because I kind of just coasted through high school. But once I got to college, I really got hit with a lot harder classes, a lot more workload. So I really just had to like make a choice. Like if I want to keep getting, slammed with work and keep stressing about everything, then I guess I could keep living that life, or I could lock everything down, organize myself and live a much happier life with my relationship with work, I would say.
That's awesome. And Lucas, what would your advice be to someone that might be interested in picking up one of the many habits that we just discussed?
Honestly, just give it a shot. I know it's easy to kind of put things off and say, all right, maybe I'll try it next week or next month, and it comes next year and you never end up doing it. I think the best way to try and do it is to just not think about it and just commit to it. Say tomorrow I'm going to try this, and then give yourself a week. Make you do it for a week. Make yourself do it for a week or a month or whatever it is. And I think that once you kind of start establishing that habit and you become more comfortable with it, it just ultimately becomes the routine, and then you just kind of stick with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, the structuring your schedule habit, I guess, is the hardest habit to start because once you have that structuring your schedule habit, it's easy to incorporate new habits using the scheduled
Yeah.
structure.
Right.
So once you're putting things in your calendar, like, and you hold yourself accountable to that, and you want to play violin for an hour every night before going to bed, like, if you put that in your calendar, you will do it. So, I think it's just getting that first, like, time organizational piece. And then after that, all the other habits kind of fit in like puzzle pieces straight into that, as I call it, GCal.
Yeah, well, and just to go off something Lucas said, you try it for a week. So not every single new habit you try to adopt is going to become successful. Like not every habit is actually what's best for you. So like recently or a few months ago, I put on my Google Calendar like the week after spring break, I'm gonna run at 5 a.m. And so I saw it on my calendar like the week after spring break, and I wanted to be committed. I wanted to be disciplined. I didn't want to go back on an expectation I set for myself in the past. And so I went running 5 a.m. for the first 3 days that week. But that was a really bad week to try to start getting up at 5 a.m. because I had activities scheduled until 10:30 p.m. So I was really only getting like 6 hours of sleep. And then running and then the gym and then trying to like get through all class and go to work and everything. And it was honestly just too much. And I realized that after 3 days, like it's just not worth it. And so I had to tell myself, you know what, it's okay. Like you try, you gave it a full, like an honest effort to try to adopt this habit and it just like not working out. And maybe in the future, 5 a.m. runs will be the optimal habit for me. But just especially in that week, given that I had stuff scheduled late, it just wasn't working out. And I think it's important to be honest with yourself if it's not working out and try to like at the end of the day you want to be realistic like you want to set ambitious goals for yourself but you don't want to push yourself so hard to the point where you're not getting enough sleep and that kind of segues into what I want to talk about next which is your sleep habits so I'll just go first I try to go to sleep around generally on weekdays around 9:30 9:45 and then wake up 5:45 like just in time to get ready for the gym and then go.
I guess I'll go next. I have admittedly really bad sleep habits. It's been a problem for me for a long time. Going back through high school, it used to be even worse. But in college now at Rice this semester, I've been going to bed around 11:30 or 12 maybe, and then getting up at 5:30 during the week for the gym. So best case scenario, I'm getting about 6 hours of sleep a night. Typically it's more like five and a half. And the result of that is that I inevitably probably once every other week miss a day of 6 a.m. gym. And it's unfortunate, but like Jacob said, it's when you're sacrificing sleep like that, sometimes it is more important to prioritize and say, if I get up today and go to the gym, I'm going to be so unproductive all day doing schoolwork after the fact. So it's something that now that recruiting's over for me, and I don't have to worry about juggling recruiting and school. I want to try and get my sleep right because I think it's going to be more important for recovery as I continue to age. And I'm not going to be able to get away with the things I get away with now in terms of sleep in a couple years, especially after doing intense workouts. So I definitely need to get that in check for sure.
Yeah, I would say like Lucas, I'm also not super disciplined about how I sleep. I would say again, like Lucas, I go to bed between 11:30 and 12 every night. I try not to go to bed past 12 ever. But if I do, it's usually because of just I'm doing something or there's some sort of event. But if I'm just like alone by myself and I have work doing that I have to do, I just kind of will pause it and hopefully it's not due early the next morning. But and try to go to bed at midnight and wake up and do it. Then as far as what time I wake up, I usually work out after class. I have 4 consecutive morning classes in McNair Hall, which for those of you that don't go to Rice, that's our business school, and is located right next to the rec. So I like to put on my gym clothes and then go to class, and then straight from class go to the gym. So that also kind of causes me to miss some gym days, especially if I'm sick from class, or if I oversleep class, then I'll usually also oversleep the gym. So tying those two together isn't always the smartest idea, but it's what I've had to do up to this point.
Cool. And do you guys have any tips for the viewers of like how they could enhance their sleep? Like, I'll just give an example. One of the things I did is this semester I got an eye mask. So like even though my room is generally pretty dark, there's always like a few lights coming from like the chargers, like a little lights coming through the blinds. So getting an eye mask, I watched a random YouTube video and it said like an eye mask really helps preserve like the dark environment. And I think that's been maybe beneficial to me. I'm not necessarily sure if it's made a huge impact, but it's especially nice when I want to take a nap because then I can just pretty much go lights out at any hour of the day. Do you guys have any tips like that?
Yeah, I mean, so throughout my life, I feel like there have been certain periods where I'll have like maybe a week or something where I'll have some sort of like light insomnia, where I can't fall asleep. I'm having trouble with that. It usually happens to me in consecutive days. So which isn't great because that means I have multiple consecutive days with bad sleep. But ever since I kind of started, I started doing like mindfulness practices as I'm trying to fall asleep. I don't use like an app or a book or anything like that. I just kind of like focus on my breath, and that usually helps me fall asleep in under like 5, 10 minutes. So if you have trouble sleeping, I would recommend that.
Yeah, I think focusing on your breath is a really great way to just kind of calm down, especially I'm one of those people that when my head hits the pillow, like my mind just wants to keep on running and thinking about stuff that I was doing during the day. It's kind of hard for me to shut off. In high school, it was an even bigger problem. I mentioned I had even worse sleep habits in high school. I could some nights, I used to have really bad insomnia. I could be laying in bed for 4 hours before I fell asleep. When I got to college and I was doing a lot of schoolwork and then a lot of extracurricular stuff, that I wouldn't recommend this. I started taking melatonin, but I think that you can kind of like psychologically feel like you're becoming dependent on that. So I would try and avoid that. Something else that I think is like more natural, it can help you just naturally fall asleep is to just read like a relaxing book, just focusing on that. I think it naturally tires your eyes and it kind of takes your mind off whatever it is that you're kind of psyched up about, which I think is important, trying to decompress before going to bed. So that'd be my advice.
Yeah, that's awesome, guys. I appreciate it. And I just have one other kind of piece of advice that I think has been a really positive change for me. So in high school, like my phone charger was right next to the head of my bed, and I like optimized it so I could like lean my phone up against the table and just like lay in bed and like watch stuff on my phone. And my sleep schedule was really bad in high school as well. Like not only would I stay up late playing video games or like going out for a run super late at night, but I would also like on top of that watch another like hour or two of YouTube. So it was just really bad. But as soon as I got to college, the beginning of freshman year, I made a point to put my phone charger on the other end of the bed. And so now it forces me not only in the like when I'm trying to go to sleep, do I not have that distraction of my phone's right there, but also in the mornings when the alarm's going off, I have to get out of bed to go turn the alarm off. So it's like double beneficial on both sides of a night of sleep. But now I want to move on. We've been talking a lot about kind of the things we do that have been helping us be successful, but I know like obviously we're not perfect. So what has been y'all's biggest failure and what have you learned from that experience?
I guess I'll start. So I don't know that this is necessarily a failure as much as it's just like something that I wish that I'd done differently. And then ultimately, it was a great learning experience, similar to how I think failures are oftentimes our best learning experiences.
For
But
sure.
something that I've thought a lot about over the last 2 years that I wish that I'd done differently was with respect to my college choice. I know I talked about it earlier. I chose University of Buffalo, thought that just kind of through hard work, I'd be able to kind of break into investment banking. I didn't really understand at that point. I come from a medical family, so I didn't really understand how on the business side of things, how important connections and alumni networks are in terms of recruiting for entry level finance roles. And when I got to University at Buffalo, my mentor, who's outstanding, and I wouldn't be in the position I am today without him, kind of told me, like, why are you here? You've basically set yourself back so far by being at this institution when you could have gone to another institution that kind of would have put you way far ahead in your recruiting process. And that hung over my head for the 18 months I was at University at Buffalo. I felt that I didn't do enough research kind of in high school when I was thinking about going to college. And I felt that I had potentially set myself a point that I wouldn't be able to overcome through hard work like I'd initially thought. Ultimately, obviously, it worked out in the end, but it's something that did hang over my head for a really, really long time and was just constantly beating me down. So it's something that I wish that I'd done differently. But on the flip side, I also have learned the most in the past 18 months by feeling like I had that chip on my shoulder and needing to do something to make up for something, if you will. So in hindsight, I don't necessarily wish that I'd done it differently because I really enjoyed my time at University of Buffalo and now here at Rice, I'm really enjoying my time. And I think it's been and will continue to be throughout the rest of my life an integral part of who I am. Um, but yeah, I kind of live with the policy that I'd like to have zero regrets. And my biggest fear for the last 18 months was that I may regret that choice for the rest of my life. So I guess it's just trying to strike a balance between living in the moment, but also being forward looking, I guess.
Yeah, no, I love the main kind of takeaway there. Like, it's definitely fair enough to wish that you handled a certain situation differently. But I think as long as you really try to handle each and every situation the best you can in that moment with all given information available to you at that time, I think you definitely should try to not have any regrets. Like, you only get one chance at life, right? So you might as well just do your best. And if you look back and see something didn't work out the way you planned, that doesn't necessarily mean you even made a bad choice in the moment. It just means things didn't go your way. And definitely, as long as you're able to take some learnings away from it, I think even the biggest failures can lead to the greatest successes. So, Austin, let's go to you.
Yeah, I first want to say thank you for that insight, Lucas. I've known you for a few months now, and that's something I didn't know too much about. So I enlightened me about, I guess, who you are, your story getting here, and it's quite impressive that
Thank
you
you.
were willing to make that jump. I've told Lucas this a number of times, but I don't think I could ever kind of have the mental fortitude to enter a whole new community like college. Just knowing that like it could go poorly, and I'm really just happy kind of where I am, and I don't know if there would be some sort of like recruiting reason that would galvanize me to roll those dice and take that chance. And it's really impressive that you did. So,
Thank you.
and as far as my biggest failure, also has to do with recruiting. So I always knew I was interested in investment banking. Uh, so first, I always knew I was interested in investment banking. Um, really since freshman year of high school, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I just kind of assumed that the path would form itself for me. And all the way up to my sophomore year, I still didn't know too much about the recruiting process. Um, I got interested in all the business clubs on campus, basically the second semester of my sophomore year, which if you know anything about recruiting, you know that is incredibly late. And I just didn't have the knowledge that I do now when making decisions about even like little things like course selection. I really wish I had reached out to upperclassmen and mentors who had gone through that process earlier when I was a freshman, and kind of listen to their advice about what classes I should pick and when I should be joining certain clubs, what I should be spending my time on. And I guess I really didn't realize until too late that I was behind the curve, even though I thought I was all the way up until this point ahead of the curve. So I went to Spain during second half of May and the entirety of July of the summer after my sophomore year, which for me was during when a lot of the recruiting was happening. So I was getting calls from my friends at home saying I'm having these super days, these coffee chats, and I always assume that they're all on a willing basis. So when I get back from Spain, all the seats will still be open, and I'll still have just as much of a chance to get there. I was incredibly mistaken. Uh, Houston recruiting generally happens a lot earlier than New York recruiting. So that ship had completely already sailed by the time I was doing New York recruiting, even though I didn't necessarily want to do Houston that much. So I would say going back now, when I look at like big long term goals I have, I don't want to let them sit in my back pocket without having like me making sure that I'm like completely on top of what I need to do now to get there then. And I will never, I guess, do that again. Like I will never just let time pass by when I have like a very clear goal in mind without doing research about how to get there.
Austin, I love that you just said that. I think that is something I think about every single day, multiple times a day, is like once you've found kind of your life's purpose or like your main goal in life, like I feel like we should try really strive to do everything we can to help work towards that goal. And I'm not saying like every minute of every day has to be actively working towards that goal. Like of course we have multiple interests, like we're pretty deep people. Like we have a lot of different things that are interesting to us and that we care about. But at the end of the day, like I think each of the three of us has something that really kind of grounds us and is like what we always are looking forward to in the future. And I definitely agree, like we should really be trying to push ourselves in that direction, like on a daily basis and through habits, through what we're studying, through the people we surround ourselves with. Like that's what we need to be working towards because we're not gonna just magically one day achieve something great. Just like you're not gonna just magically roll into an IB desk, like it takes a lot of time, a lot of preparation, and a lot of hard work. And so that's what we're here to do each and every day. And that's why I love Rice. I feel like there's a lot of peers that share that mindset where they're here for a very specific reason and they're constantly working hard to achieve their goals. But now we're going to shift gears a little bit. So we're going to open up the floor. What has been on your mind recently?
I guess I'll start. So I kind of have been kind of with everything going on in the market right now, I've been trying to decide how I should go about allocating my capital, or more specifically, when. I know I was talking with Austin, I believe you too, Jacob, a couple weeks ago, how about kind of the adults in our life oftentimes will talk about dollar cost averaging, and just when they know that they want to do an investment, they're thinking, okay, I'm going to put in $1,000 for the next 10 weeks and just kind of see whatever my interest point is in any one of those given weeks. I kind of have this idea that based on like kind of the past two financial crises being the subprime and dot-com crises, the market didn't reach a bottom until about 18 months after the Fed started cutting rates. And the Fed hasn't even started yet. So based on that, obviously like what happened before isn't guaranteed to happen again, but generally like you should look at the past as a general indicator of what could be the future. In my time horizon, I don't think it's going to make a big difference because the investments I'm making today, I'm not looking to access for probably the next 35, 40 years. So, in the grand scheme of things, this is going to be a very minor difference for me. But I'm still just trying to think about how, like, kind of the broader market or older population should be thinking about placing capital now versus waiting until the market reaches a bottom. It's just something that I've been thinking about recently and I've been trying to wrap my head around.
Yeah, I mean, I would say very similar thoughts have been going through my brain. I don't do as much investing as I would say Lucas does, but similarly, I'm very nervous for the next 18 months, especially if the Fed starts cutting rates, just because of the ripple effect that will have in the job market, especially in sectors like finance that Lucas and I are both interested in. So. I would say it is worrying to see bank closures, especially as someone who's interested in working at a bank. Hopefully a bank that has a balance sheet. And if a bank has a balance sheet, they're definitely at risk right now. So I would say I've been thinking about the market movements a lot more from a personal career standpoint and less of a personal investing standpoint. But it is definitely interesting to see how my portfolio has moved over the past couple months with the Fed raising rates. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, talking about it from the angle of like, will this bank be around to keep me as an employee in the next, 2 years or so? I personally am of the opinion that the big banks are here to stay. Like, I think it has to be a very severe risk management error in order to cause something like SVB. I don't really see that happening at any of the big banks. And so with that, like I'm pretty confident in the big banks. I don't know necessarily as much about the regional banks. I think we're going to see some consolidation as people lose faith in some of the regional banks that are similar to SVB, and a few others have already gone down. I think as people start to lose faith in those regional banks, they're still going to have to put their money somewhere. And so a lot of that money is going to be going towards the big banks. I saw a news article yesterday talking about how a lot of money is moving into money market funds. And so that's just one trend to be aware of. But I definitely wouldn't be scared, like Lucas said as well. Like I'm not in the same mindset of someone that's a lot closer to the retirement age. And like for you, you said you're probably not going to access your investments for 35, 40 years. I'm more just like my investment account is more just for like learning and for trading for experience. Like as soon as I get one real paycheck, it's probably going to be more than my entire investment account could be. So at that point, all the money I have now is insignificant, and whether I doubled it or lost all of it, like in the grand scheme of things, it really won't matter for me. It's much more about the learning. Lucas, do you want to talk a little bit more about potentially what you could see happening with the markets and what your advice to those older people would be?
I think, I mean, obviously, I mean, even when I've spoken to financial professionals, they're always very wary of predicting what's going to happen in the markets. It's just not something that you like to do. But I think right now, I'm still very wary of what's going on. I think, I mean, inflation's what, like 6% right now. I don't think that that's something that we should be celebrating. I mean, it's an improvement over what has happened in the past, but we're still seeing huge beats in non-farm payrolls. The labor market's very strong still. I know unemployment recently, not anymore, but recently was at like a 50-year low. So the job market's still doing very well. And Jerome Powell, for the past year now almost, has been talking about how we're going to need to be seeing more suffering in the labor market before kind of things shift. And we still haven't really seen that. So I think we're going to continue to see the Fed raise rates. I'm honestly surprised. I didn't know if they were going to continue to raise rates the last meeting after what happened with
Right.
SVB. I honestly was expecting them to kind of just put up the white flag for that meeting, but
Mhm.
what we're at 4.75 to 5% right now, I think. So I think average forecasts are about 50 basis points higher than they are now. So maybe we'll see two more 25 basis point increases. But generally, right now, I'm still looking to be more risk off. Wouldn't be investing in like big tech right now, for example, or communications. For me, right now, a lot of it's just putting it into SPY. I think right now that's what I would like to do best, potentially heading into a recession or just economic downturn. Also, for me, I'm really interested in energy. So for me, it's midstream oil and gas. It's just they have very stable cash flows. They're tax advantaged. A lot of them are because they're structured as master limited partnerships, so they pay great dividends. Some of them are pretty disciplined with their leverage and whatnot. So for me, that's something that I like to invest in, given my industry interest as well. But right now, for me, the majority of my investment is just going into SPY.
Yeah, kind of adding on to that, I think all three of us are 20 or under, so we've seen two market crashes in our life, and we've seen quantitative easing or quantitative tightening for like 20% of our lifetimes, if not way less. So to see kind of a period of quantitative tightening again, coming out of the Fed is really interesting to watch the market reaction to that. And I mean, a lot of people say that Jay Powell probably should have raised rates earlier than he did, before COVID, right after the 2020 election. 2020 election. Well, I guess the election took place in 2019, so he became president in 2020. So, maybe that's wrong. No, right. The 2020 election was in 2020 after COVID. Yeah, it was after
Yeah.
COVID.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. So anyway, so a lot of people argue that Jerome Powell probably should have raised rates, kind of leading up to the election. But there was a lot of sentiment around um, market movements, and I think he was under a lot of political pressure to make the market look good during the election, so that he could then, be reinstated in his job in the new administration. And I think that's kind of a big reason uh, why people are complaining, I guess, at how the Fed is acting now, just because they think they were a little too late to the game in terms of rates and rates.
Yeah, it's really interesting to bring up like politics and all of this. Like, even though the Fed is trying to be kind of independent of like party politics, like it always still seems to have an impact on our lives, you know. But just looking at the time, we're pretty much almost out of time. Is there anything else relating to like the current market, current situation that you guys want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like you asked if Lucas had any advice for older people looking to retire soon. Like, it's just scary to me to see that like we could have a full decade from 2000 2010 with basically zero economic growth. I don't know the right answer. I don't know necessarily how people should be necessarily allocating their capital, but um, definitely definitely quantitative tightening scares me because that is something that we saw lead up to two market crashes within our lifetimes. So I would say hedge against um, hedge against increasing rates. And there's inflation based treasuries that you can buy that hedge against those rates, um, or just straight equities. So
I I think one other thing that I mean, I got my start in being interested in finance, that is, from investing in precious metals, pretty much. I mean, I was also investing in cryptocurrencies at that time, but I think right now would be a great time to kind of flee the equity markets if you're bearish on them and go into those safe haven assets like gold. I know the future for me, I think I look forward to hopefully one day Bitcoin being treated as one of those assets. I know it's not there now. But yeah, I think gold is a great option right now for people looking to kind of be more risk off because gold I think has it's negative beta, right? And so it's unrelated to the return of the market. So that's one of the best things to be in right now if you're bearish on the market.
Also, just straight bearish ETFs. I mean, like FAS is a good one. It's triple levered, so be careful with that one. But definitely,
Be very, I'm warning, be very careful with that one.
but it's definitely an ETF I like to track as well in relation to the market. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, now we're going to kind of transition to the final two questions of the podcast. So the second to last question is, what is something you guys want to tell me?
I guess I'll start with this one. Something I want to tell you, and I don't think I've really communicated this to you. When I first got here, I kind of similar to Austin, typically use the gym in the afternoon after classes. But when I got here, I found out that Jacob went early in the morning, so he kind of motivated me to, kind of shift my sleep habits, get up early in the morning, be disciplined, go to the gym before classes. Which honestly, with the way recruiting has been, with coffee chats every afternoon, I would not have been able to go to the gym without that. So he kind of, before recruiting even started, got that instilled into my schedule and help me be disciplined with that. So I really appreciate that. But in
Awesome,
addition
dude.
to that point, you just have this energy and you're so focused on your goals like entrepreneurship and stuff, and you do things for the right reasons. Like you take difficult classes just for the sake of learning. You don't take easy classes in your schedule just because they're kind of easy A's and whatnot. Like you're really focused on the learning process behind that. And you're so passionate about entrepreneurship and like having this podcast and interviewing startup founders. It's just so cool to see you so focused on what you want. And it's so motivating for me to watch and kind of try and be as motivated with what I want to do as you are. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Oh, I mean, just real quick before we hear from Austin, I could definitely say the same about you. I mean, you have your kind of like why IB kind of story, but it's just for you, it's not just like something you memorize for a coffee chat. Like it's really like a huge, huge part of who you are. And like that's awesome to see you as well actively working towards your goals and like coming to the gym with me. I really appreciate it. It's really fun when, at the start it was just me, maybe me and my roommate, but seeing you there as well, sometimes getting a few other people. Like it's a lot of fun to go to the gym in the morning with the boys. Like it's really a great atmosphere to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean, kind of adding on to what Lucas said. So when I was telling my story, I forgot to mention that when I first came into Rice, I was a mathematical economic analysis major. A major I did not really enjoy. It was very theoretical, very math based, and I spent honestly all my time complaining about it with my peers in all my classes. And to be quite honest with you, they hated it too. So it couldn't have been that great of a major if even the people taking the classes weren't super big fans of it. But once I switched to finance, which I did in my sophomore year, second semester of my sophomore year, I started taking classes with Jacob. Like it was just an instant shift in how positive I felt about the classes I was taking. Like I went from walking out of classes like barely awake, complaining with my friends, to walking out of classes with Jacob, just like recounting like the most interesting things we learned. And I think it is a very rare day at Rice University that I don't learn something in a finance class that doesn't absolutely fascinate me. Like what I'm learning now is incredible, and learning it with Jacob makes it just all the more better because he's just as excited about it as I am. And we're just super positive about the classes that we're taking. We know how much they're going to impact our lives, and how much they're like how much valuable information they're truly teaching us. So I would like to actually thank you, Jacob, and just say I really appreciate you keeping me excited about each every day.
Yeah, dude, I love it when we come out of class and we're like, dude, that was so lit. I feel like we say that quite often.
Almost every day.
But
Yeah.
something that I feel like I've had this conversation with you before is just sitting in Baker Commons and hearing like what the computer science kids are working on and like the history majors are working on and then like what we're working on. Like I tell you this all the time, Austin. Like I'm so glad we're in business and not to knock on any of the other majors, but it's like we found something that truly excites us and we're truly passionate about. And it's like it's business is always gonna be here, like regardless of if a recession happens or not. Like business is always going to be here. Business is the way the world moves. And so it's just super exciting that we get to like be in that mindset on a day-to-day basis, be learning about it, but also just be constantly thinking about business, constantly talking about it. I absolutely love it. Now we're just going to go on to the very last question, which is what is something you want to tell the viewers?
I guess I can
Yeah, go ahead.
start again. I think this is something that I've always believed, but especially over the past 6 months, I would say has become increasingly apparent and just kind of become a mantra, I guess, for me is do things for the right reasons, but also like don't view anything as just a means to an end. And I guess the way that that's manifested itself in my life is I was at university at Buffalo, um, and in spring of my freshman year, my mentor told me if you stop growing here, you should think about transferring to give yourself a better shot at breaking into investment banking, which he knew I was committed to doing. And ultimately, that's what I did. But I'm still very thankful for the time I spent at Buffalo, because I saw how much I grew in those 3 semesters there. And I honestly don't know that if I had started at Rice, I would have had better growth than I had at Buffalo. Like I still saw myself developing so well there, and I had a great learning experiences all around in the classroom and extracurricularly. I had great internships, great investment fund experience, and I realized that in my life, I always want to continue in what I'm in until I see myself stop growing, and then I'll pivot to the next opportunity. And now that I'm going through banking recruiting, and you always hear people getting their two and out and then leaving for the buy side, that doesn't sit right with me at this point anymore because I want to, once I'm in a role, I want to stay there until I see my growth plateau. So I don't want to go into banking, let's say, with the mindset that this is just a means to an end, just so that I can get my next job. Like I'm very interested in banking. I'm really looking forward to getting on the desk in the summer and then hopefully full time. But I don't want to go in and then my second week on the desk recruit for the buy side. I want to stay there until I see my growth plateauing. And if that happens, then I'll think about leaving. But I guess my advice to the viewers is just when you're in something, just make sure that you're maximizing the growth that you can get out of it before you try and pivot or look at other opportunities.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that. Awesome.
Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of talk a little bit about his point first before I go into my own. But um, for those of you viewers that don't know too much about investment banking and recruiting, like one of the things that recruiters are very worried about is hiring people that are going to be 2 years and out. Like they do not want to have analysts come in that want to do other things with their lives. And a lot of people kind of fake the like, I'm interested in investment banking. I want to do this forever. When they really just are want to do private equity in a couple of years, whatever. But I have never heard this guy talk about exit opportunities. I've never heard this guy talk about what could he be potentially doing after his 2 years? Like he has been all in on investment banking since I met him, and I think that's incredibly impressive. And as far as what I would tell the viewers, do what you love. It sounds like what everybody says, but I hated econ, like I mentioned. I had terrible GPA. I barely paid attention to my classes. I hated doing every piece of work that I was assigned. Now that I love my major and I love the cohort I have, I'm excited to go to class every day. I do my homework very diligently, and I don't procrastinate anymore because I think it's all the things I'm learning are incredibly cool. And not to mention, it's been incredible for my GPA to switch to something that I can really spend my time on, and spend my time thoughtfully, kind of working on and learning. So don't just do what you love because it'll make you happy. Do what you love because you'll be way more successful at what you love than what you hate. So yeah,
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the data room. This was a blast. We should definitely do this another time. Um, and for the viewers out there, let me know what you guys think about having 3 people on the discussion instead of 2. And with that said, that concludes this episode of the data room, and we'll see you next time.
thanks, Jacob.
Thanks, Jacob.